Greetings, my friends. It's time for another episode of the Show Me Hoops podcast.
Toby, if Joe says it's time to get started, it's time to get started.
That's right.
And so
time to go.
First of all, I want to apologize to everybody that we're running about half an hour behind. I know people sit breathlessly beside their phone or their computer every Sunday night to wait to listen to this. And but I just drove through some of the craziest April Fool's weather I've ever drove through in my life. There's probably about 20 or 25 car wrecks. Matter of fact, while I was on the phone with you, I drove by one car that got completely knocked 180 degrees in the wrong direction on Interstate 70. Just crazy weather. So it took me a little
April
bit.
1st.
Yeah,
That's insane.
April 1st, and it's not an April Fool's joke. So tonight we got a couple things to talk about. First of all, we want to get an update on our bracket challenge. Then we're going to talk about NCAA tournament. We got the national championship tomorrow. We're about to start the NBA playoffs, and then I thought it would be just a good time of year to talk about coaches changing jobs, and also just the nature of this time of year in education, not just
right.
with coaches, but with teachers also, with administrators. People this time of year tend to kind of change and pick a different job sometimes, and when that happens, it kind of creates a musical chairs effect. And
right.
So let's get started with our bracket challenge. First of all, I'd just like to get an update for our listeners out there. How's your bracket looking right now, Tobe?
My bracket, not good. You know what? I looked last night, and I think you actually ended up, I'm going to check it right now. It's not good. I'm just going to put it that way. Finished 23rd on Just Win Today, bracket challenge. For my personal one, oh, no, I'm way better than you. You're 33rd. So you suck more than I do.
Yeah, it was one of those years.
It is crazy.
Everybody, yeah.
Unreal. And but then, of course, the one that really, really matters is Team Toby versus Team David, in which, how else could this work out for the first time we ever do this? We end up in a tie.
Yeah, it's really hard to believe. It's really, really hard to believe. And if you look at the groups, I'm trying to pull it up as we speak here. Yeah, it's just crazy how many of my brackets were terrible. Basically, I got burned this year because I picked Michigan State.
Mm-hmm.
I usually ride with them in the playoffs, and just
Man,
so many.
I'm going to go ahead and say something right now that's going to sting a little bit.
Okay.
So just buckle up. This might hurt.
Okay.
And I don't know, but we talked about this a while back, and you always say this, and I believe it's true. In the tournament, you pick coaches.
I said that. Yes.
That's a great philosophy.
Yep.
And I think Izzo's an amazing coach. But how far has he gotten in the last several years? They have not had great tournament runs.
I would say just
especially
the last couple.
on a year like this year where they're the favorite.
Just the
going
last
into
couple,
the season.
I would say you're right, but I think you could say the same thing about Bill Self at Kansas. I know they finally broke through to the Final Four this year.
Oh, I agree.
You could say the same thing a little bit about Coach K. You could say the same thing about Calipari right now. I think right now, the guy that's doing the best job in college basketball is Jay Wright. I think another guy who's he's up there at the top and he doesn't get mentioned enough is Roy Williams. I mean, Roy Williams and Jay Wright don't get the one and done players. And so every now and then you'll see a Carolina team like this year where they cycle through and they've got juniors and seniors, but they don't have really any NBA players.
Right.
And maybe one or two, and, they're not going to be
big-time guys.
Impact players. Right. They're going to get drafted somewhere or be on a roster, but they're not going to be a player. But every now and then, like if you look at Villanova, there's not one guy on Villanova's team that's going to make an all-star team in the NBA, not one. And, I don't see anybody on their team with the exception of Brunson. I don't like Bridges as much as a lot of people do. I think
something really cool the other day I saw Bleacher Report put out, and our man Otto Porter Jr., kind of the neatest thing I've seen since he's been playing in the NBA. Somebody put a thing out of Bridges the other day as a NBA comparison is Otto Porter. I mean, I don't really think they play the same or anything, but I just thought that's cool that, hey, now Bubba's made it to a point where guys coming out are getting compared to him.
Right.
But, yeah, I agree with you. Brunson is just got named Naismith Player of the Year. And
he's a good player.
He's complete.
And you
I put out
it.
last night, if you're a late first-round drafting team and you don't take that guy and you take another point guard, there's something wrong with you.
There's going to be – I'm just going to say there's going to be 2 or 3 guards drafted ahead of him that people are going to look back and I'd even say he's going to get
bet
picked
more than that. Right now
10
he's
spots
projected
too
like
late.
45th.
He's going to get picked at least 10 spots too late. At least,
Yeah.
I mean, he should be a first-round pick. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He's going to get picked at least 10 spots too late because of potential and just stupidity.
Yep.
I looked at the mock first-round stuff right now, and like 22 picks in the first round are supposed to be freshmen and sophomores, mostly freshmen. And it's like we talk about, basically every year 2/3 of the draft is your underclassmen.
Yeah.
So if you compare that to a high school situation, if every year you had, a good incoming freshman class and they all left, and you only got to keep 1 or 2 of those guys every year, and you're basically trying to build a program starting over every year. It'd be like Three Rivers College with a bunch of freshmen trying to go play Mizzou with juniors and seniors. Even if Three Rivers had really, really good freshmen, it's just hard to beat guys that are 3 years older than you. It's just a fact.
And there's a stat today that like 70% of the players or the starters in the Final Four this year were juniors and seniors.
Right. Yeah.
So, it just goes to show you got to have some experience out there.
Well, and I think that what happens is you go through these cycles where we've been doing this one-and-done thing for so long now that the talent, it takes about 4 or 5 years before you've cycled through all of these guys to where it's like all of the NBA talent, the upper NBA talent is gone. The only upper NBA talent in college right now is the freshman. That's it. The rest of it's already left. It's already been drafted. And so, anyway, that's a fascinating topic. So right now, Diogenes 94, whoever you are, if Villanova wins tomorrow night,
they've got it.
They're going to win the championship, and they're in the 99.5 percentile of brackets in the country.
With 1,000 points.
So way to represent. And then you and we are going to come into a dead tie. So we got to figure out a tiebreaker for that because it's not just tie today. It's just win today. And we got to figure out a way to have a winner and a loser. So moving on, let's talk about coaches changing jobs and just education in general this time of year. For everybody out there listening at home, the way that this works, just in case you didn't know, teachers are hired or not rehired in March for the following year. So if you're a teacher in a school district, the March board meeting rolls around. The school board makes a decision to rehire those teachers for the next year or to not rehire those teachers for the next year. So if somebody were not rehired, they would finish out this contract year and they would continue to get paid through the summer. But they would know right now that they don't have a teaching position for the following school year. If you were rehired for the following year, then of course you'd go ahead and get paid through the rest of this year. But then you have a contract for the following school year also. So that's the way the rehiring process works. You get your contract, depending on the language in your contract, you got about 15 days to sign it and turn it back in, things like that. This time of year, jobs open up. People know that they're retiring. People know that they're going to take a different job. And one job opens and then another job somebody takes that job.
Stuff starts moving around.
And you get this game of musical chairs. And you and I were joking around, and I'm not going to say anybody's name, but we were joking around about a month ago about one particular situation in Southeast Missouri where you had 3 coaches that were leaving the school they're at and how hypothetically they could all just trade jobs.
Yeah.
And that is actually a realistic option as we
kind of, sort of, somewhat happening.
talk tonight. And I was talking with a reporter friend, a friend of the program. I won't say his name. But I was talking with a friend of mine, and I mentioned to him, well, he texted me this week and said, hey, did you hear such and such interviewed for this job? And I said, I want to remind you that I told you on March the 13th. And I pulled up our text and said that this was going to happen. And, it's just kind of like, yep, you called it. And so, this time of year, things like this happen. So, again, we're not breaking news or anything like that. We're not trying to create news or,
no love bombs happening.
Anything like that. But we're just talking in generalities. When
if you're one of these coaches, what are you looking for
right
now?
What are you looking for if you're changing jobs or if somebody calls you? And I can remember when I first started my coaching career, every year I would get 2 or 3, people that would inquire. And usually the way that this works is it's not anything as obvious as the principal from another school or a board member calling you. Usually it's a booster, it's a fan. The
Buddy Garrity's of the world.
It's the Buddy Garrity's of the world. They'll call you up and say, hey, we're going to be looking for a coach. Would you be interested? And, depending on how much you love the situation you're in or whatever, you at least listen. And, because, sometimes they come with a whole lot of money. Sometimes they come with other, other things like, you may be teaching, like one of my really good friends in coaching was a football coach when he's teaching math. Somebody came along, he's teaching math, teaching 6 math classes a day and head coaching football.
For people that don't understand, just teaching itself and lesson plans and grading, and then, there's more time put in than just from 8 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon.
You're talking
with that, and then on top of coaching.
Yeah, the actual teaching job itself is probably 40 hours a week, and then the outside of teaching, like you said, lesson plan, grading, everything else is anywhere from 5 to 10 hours extra a week. So let's just say it's a 50-hour week job to be a teacher, a good teacher, if you're going to be a good one.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you're going to coach, and especially a sport as time demanding as football. The season's shorter, but the preparation of a football coach is, I would argue, more intensive than any other sport because of the amount of film.
There's got to be a ton of scouting.
The amount of film breakdown that you have to do, and looking at both sides of the ball and everything else. So, football very, very, very intense to break down and recruit and scout and all that stuff. So, anyway, he got offered a job to go be just not a math teacher, teaching something physical education, ISS, something where he didn't have all the lesson plan and grading responsibilities. So
take
it wasn't
time off his hands.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily more money, but it was just a quote unquote better job from the teaching part of his job. So that's some things that they come to you with sometimes. So I'm going to say this: talent is never a guarantee. So when we're talking about what do you look for in a job, talent is the obvious answer. But talent can come and go, and talent can cycle. And we have a lot of coaches that we talk to in this program. One of the guys we talked to is Greg Hollifield, Hall of Famer at Sikeston. I can remember when Coach Hollifield went to Sikeston. Sikeston had a decent program. They were okay. It's not that they were losing every year. But Sikeston was not a powerhouse program. In my lifetime, Sikeston went to the Final Four one time in my lifetime before Coach Hollifield got there. And, when he got there, it wasn't like they just set the world on fire right away.
It took some time.
He won some district titles, and they had good players and things like that. But now you got to understand, back then it was 4-class basketball. They were class 4, and that was the biggest class. So it was a little different. But, the point is, people might look at Sikeston right now. If say that job come open and say, wow, Sikeston, they have a lot of talent, and they do. But that was something that was built over time. Compare that to when he went to Sikeston, and I've gave this example before, but Dexter was the team to beat in the area at that size of a school. They were class 3, and then they went up to class 4 when the classification system changed. Dexter was the number 1 ranked team in the state. They were unbelievable. They were really, really good. And if you were picking jobs today, Dexter's a program that's on the way up for sure. And we're not bashing anybody. But if you were picking a job just based on talent alone today, and I said you had to pick between those two, you would pick Sikeston because on the surface they have more talent. But talent can come in cycles, and talent is also a little bit of a byproduct of what amount of work you put in. So talent talent is a factor, but it cannot be one of your main factors because talent can come and go. And talent is part of what you do as a coach. As far as what you instill, the other thing that can't be a part of it is culture, work ethic of the kids, things like that. Yeah, that, again, let's say, I remember when I left Bell City, you were coming in and you're getting a group of kids like Blaine Stewart, Jeff Liggins, those guys, Nick Nemchek. I mean, just workers. Those guys were workers. They had grown up in it, so they were hard workers. But, again, that culture is part of what you create as a coach. So let's say it's not exactly like you want it right now. You can change that. Or let's say it's phenomenal culture that you're stepping into with great talent. That could change in 1 year if all those kids graduate or something like that.
Yep.
So those two things we're going to take off
those
the
are
table.
Variables.
They're variables, right. Here is the number one thing that I would look at, or if I were talking to a young coach or a veteran coach about, hey, this is either a good job or a bad job. The number one thing I would look at is their administration. Look at their superintendent, their principal, their school board, and the amount of support that you feel like that they're going to give you, and the amount of control that you think that they're going to give you. So that's number one is, are they going to back you up? Because everybody can, hold hands and sing the same song when we're winning, right? Everything's good. The water's calm. What are they going to be like the first parent that calls up here that's not happy that their son or daughter's not getting to play enough, or that they're not getting to shoot enough, or that, well, they didn't think that what you did in practice was fair? I mean, I've heard stories, and again, we're not ESPN or trying to have breaking news or anything, but I heard a story of one coach in Southeast Missouri at a very prestigious program that got accused of bullying his players by his administration. Like he was being a bully. And this is a place where they've won like crazy. And this coach was like, I know I'm not being as hard on them as the coach who was here when they did all these great things. And of course, we know times have changed and whatnot, and I don't know the specifics about that situation, but I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes as an administrator. What would it take for me to call my coach a bully? I mean, it would take a lot, So that was one that was way out in left field. You got to look at what your administration is going to be like when things get hard, and if you feel comfortable with them, like when I went to Crothersville, I'll never forget Jim Bidwell told me that Crothersville had went through a lot of administrators through the years. He said, if you can get administration to support you down there, that place is a gold mine. Those are his exact words. He said they have more talent than all of us, than, Charleston, Sikeston, Portersville, you name it. They have more talent than all of us year to year. But the administration, for whatever reason, has not ever got behind, and everybody pushed in the same direction at the same time. And so, I think administration is number one. Number two thing that I would look at is, and this is the biggest, thing for me as a coach, is how much time do I get?
Right.
How much time do I get with my program? Because, like, I know if you go to Charleston and you're playing Class 3 basketball, they get about as much time as they want.
Right.
And those kids can go play at the Lincoln Center and different places. Even in the off season, they're playing a lot of basketball. Comparing that to, other jobs where I know they, at the same level, Class 3, where it's like during football season, you can't even get a ball out. Or during, maybe the baseball program is really big and, well, we're going to shut you down during it. And understand, we want to be respectful to those coaches in their season. Absolutely. But what if you have a kid that doesn't even participate in that sport?
He's not playing any other sport right now.
So he can't even go shoot a free throw, during that time of year. Well, if that's the case and you have to beat Charleston, that's the team you have to beat to get out of the region, and they're getting, just say, 200 days a year with the ball in their hands, and your kids are getting 80 days a year with the ball in their hands, it's going to be really tough to beat them. I mean, you're going to have
Absolutely.
to be a miracle worker as a coach. Like, you have to be really good. The coach at that school has to be not really good, and you've got to have more talent than they do just to start with. Well, I got news for you. Danny Farmer is really good. So it's going to be hard to beat that guy.
And they've got tradition.
And they've got tradition. And that leads us
right grown up playing ball and winning and seeing it done.
That leads us right into our third point, and that would be the other thing that I look at would be, what is the tradition, and or another way to say that, what is the expectation of the coach at that school? Like if you I know some places where I've gone to coach where you go in and they say, I remember when I was at Crothersville, the kids that played for me were like, I didn't even know teams played like this in the summer. I didn't even, like they were glad to do it. We had a good time, but
they didn't know what happened.
They had never done it before. They didn't know that it existed. And so, I look like a hero because I've got us and we're playing all this ball and we're getting better and better and better. And so imagine if you went into a place and they expect you, kind of like we were just talking about, to put all this time in. Well, then you better be ready to do that. Or if you're going to a place that, like one of the places we talked about off the air, Orion, they just won a state title in basketball. Orion is a baseball powerhouse.
Yeah.
So now Joe Shoemaker's from Orion. So he grew up there. He understands the workings, the inner workings, the dynamics between the programs better than I do. But I, growing up 5 minutes away from there, and you're from that area too, Orion is a baseball school.
Absolutely.
So when you go into that job, if you're Joe Shoemaker, you have to understand, hey, how much is enough and how much is too much, because they want to be good at their baseball too. And those are just things you have to balance as a coach. And so that would be my list, would be administration. How supportive are they going to be when things get hard? Number 2, how much time are you going to let me put in?
Yeah.
And then number 3, what is the tradition and expectation, of the basketball program here? Like our good friend Aaron Bywell at Hayti. Hayti's not traditionally a basketball powerhouse. So everything he's doing right now is just gravy. They've never been this good at basketball before, consistently.
Right.
Never. And so, I mean, he's won the district 2 years in a row. I couldn't tell you the last time that happened to Hayti. I couldn't tell you. Maybe it's happened somewhere recently, but I couldn't tell you when. He just got him to the state finals in his second year at the school.
Yeah. In the first year there, he was a shot away from.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
beating the team that won state.
That won a state. So back-to-back years, they've come up just short against the team that won a state championship.
Probably been one of the top 5 teams in the state 2 years in a row in Class 2.
So let's say he stays on this arc for the next 10 years. And in the next 10 years, they're in that same stratosphere of always with a chance to win it. Maybe, hopefully they do break through and win 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. If he does that, the expectation at Hayti will change. And if he were to ever leave
people
that
are going to
job,
look at that as one of the powerhouse schools.
the people, whoever would follow him, they would expect you to do what he did. So
exactly.
Those are my 3 things: is administration, how much time do I get, and what's the expectations around here. Those are the 3 things that I would really, really look hard at. And then all things being equal, of course you want talent and you want kids that are ready to work hard and ready to listen. And, I think as a coach, the first group you get at a school is so important, because if you can go in with a group of kids willing to buy in and do what you want to do from the outset, it's got a chance to set up that domino effect for the next group and the next group after that, and so.
You don't necessarily have to win at first, but you got to get everybody believing and buying in and, kind of having that culture from the get-go and start working on that. And then the winning will most likely follow if you're putting in the time and, working with your younger kids and everything else, especially small schools where you've got to work with your younger kids.
Yeah. And it's it's just as simple as, if you look at the first group that I ever had at Bell City, I mean, they're just great guys. I mean, like what we had there in grades 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 was pretty good talent, for Class 1 school. but you had some quality people in there, like a Jason Rampley, like a Gabe Shear, like a Luke Phillips, a Kenyon Wright. You know, that it's kind of like from day one, they were ready to work really, really hard, not make excuses. You know, they were willing to put in extra time. And so then that just sets up, when you have a group that will work without complaining and without making excuses, then the next group that comes behind them, win, lose, or draw, that's what they expect because that's what they saw the other group do. And if you can do that and you're lucky enough to win some games, which we were, then it sets up a domino effect, to where it's like, okay, the next group, they can build on that. And maybe if they have a little better talent and they've been in the system a little longer, so they ought to have better habits, it sets up to where you can build on that, But I'm always fascinated by this time of year because you see guys that will take a job and you're like, wow, that was a good move. And then every now and then, and hey, who knows, maybe I've been guilty of this too, you see guys that take a job to where when you look back, you go, wow, that, maybe he took that job for the money. And notice that we didn't say money at all. And now, hey, I'm not here to tell anybody else how to pay their bills. Everybody, has got to pay their own bills and their own finances and everything else. But I would never take a job just strictly on coaching basis, just strictly on basketball for more money.
Right.
Because it's like if you're Rick Pitino said one time, and he may be a bad guy to take advice from, but Rick Pitino said one time.
Right now, that might not be the best example to use, but.
Right. But Rick Pitino said if you chase money, it may lead you somewhere you don't want to go. He said if you chase success, money will chase you. Like if you're good at what you do, money will end up chasing after you. Like you're going to get paid.
Colin Cowherd says this a lot on his show too, where, he left ESPN, the worldwide leader, the mothership, to pursue another place, at Fox Sports, which is just kind of an up-and-coming thing. And he looked at it like a success thing. He was look at, track record and where they were going. And, that's with anything. Don't just go after the money, because if you're good and that place is good, the rest will follow.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think you can sum up like all of what you're saying as far as what you're looking at or what people should be or are looking at when pursuing another job is just, the 3 S's: structure, support, stability. What kind of structure do they have? Who's their people there? And that also goes into physical structures like facilities. That's a huge thing.
Yep.
What do you have in basketball goals or gyms or gym time? Because sometimes your time doesn't come from the school saying you can't practice right now. It comes from like an actual thing. You can't literally practice right now because the one gym's taken up today.
Yeah, volleyball's got practice, so you can't have
volleyball's got practice. You can't go in there today.
Exactly.
So what's that like? Instability. You look for administration, and I think a lot of times good administration's been there for a while. So, they've already kind of developed a certain type of culture amongst the school and the kids and the community because of their experience and their time spent within that, area.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that always fascinates me, and we had a friend of ours that called me this weekend. I won't say his name because it's not any kind of breaking news, but he called me. He's looking to leave and go somewhere else, and he's just at that point in his career. But he's actually going to go to just a completely different area, and I think that's always fascinating to me. Like when we were talking about. Like when the New Madrid job came open, New Madrid County Central job came open, and you and I were kind of spitballing ideas back and forth. Hey, who might take that job?
Right.
And when you started looking around the area, there wasn't a whole lot of names that just jumped right out that, hey, he would be somebody to call and talk to. And not bad-mouthing anybody, but it's just right now a lot of your more established coaches like a Brad Botch and Eric Bidwell, whatever, are kind of –
they're at their place.
Danny Farmer, Greg Hollifield, they're where they're at. They're going to stay where they're at, and or at least we think that, Right. But when you look at maybe a coach coming in from outside the area, I'm trying to think of, one guy that I can remember right off the top of my head, and this is going way back in history right here, but my senior year of high school, Doyle Pitts came from the west part of the state, over around Alton.
Yeah.
He came and he coached Richland. Richland had Morris Carnes, who was there, who had built a tremendous program at Richland, and he just could not get past Scott County Central.
Right.
Morris is actually from Scott County Central, but he couldn't get over the hump. Now, you got to understand, when he was at Richland, Scott County Central won a state championship 7 years in a row.
Right. Some of the all-time teams.
Yeah,
these are
some of
the
the best teams that ever come out of there. Then at the end of that run in 91, he had a team with Jeff Ross. Our friend Jeff Ross was on that team. Ronnie Patterson. They had a great team. It was we beat them pretty convincingly. Scott County beat them. But it was, like they were probably the second or third best team in the state in 1A. They were just they just happened to be in our district. The next year, Scott County beat Richland in overtime in the tournament, or the district tournament. It was could have been either way kind of game. The next year, it could have went either way again. 94, same kind of thing. Well, he kept, and I think that's where the Richland people, and I can't speak for them, but just outside looking in, I think they looked at it like, okay, they had that dominant run where they won 7 in a row. We understand you couldn't beat those teams, but
why not these ones?
We should have beat these other teams. Well, that's ridiculous, because Scott County Central was still going up there and winning a state championship. It wasn't like they were chopped liver here. They were still good. And I think Richland was kind of looking at it like, well, if we could just get by them, we would be the state champions. And I mean, Richland had some really, really good teams with Sean Cole and those guys. They just had a great team. Well, they brought in Morris, or they let Coach Carnes go and brought in Doyle Pitts from another part of the state. And Richland was just so loaded that they went ahead and won it. And Coach Carnes would have won it also if he had stayed there to coach. He would have also won a state championship, no doubt about it. So it was one of those moves. But the point that I'm bringing up, and I mean, I would be fascinated to get some feedback from the coaches that listen to this. I'm always fascinated when a coach comes in from out of your area, like a Jimmy Lincoln that came to Richland. Years after that, Jimmy Lincoln was not from that area, was not a coach in that area. He come from Russellville, central part of the state. Terrific coach. But he came down there and had a really different style. And it makes everybody else in the area have to learn how to scout that guy.
Mm-hmm.
It makes that guy coming in, he doesn't have any allies or anything like that either. So he's got to kind of build a network of people he can call for tape.
Exactly.
And scouting reports also.
Yeah, and and it's like if a coach from this area leaves the school he's at and goes to another one, right down the road, so to speak, he's probably going to bring with him the same style of play. He's not going to change who he is, in any drastic way based on his personnel. If he's a run and gun coach and he goes from, school A to school B, he's still going to play that way, or pressure defense, or whatever his style is. He's going to be like that. And like you're saying, somebody coming from a different part of the state or another state, especially I think the Southeast Missouri, where it's pretty unique. Like we've been talking about with the Final Four, we just play different down here.
Right.
And we're officiated different. And I think it's a little bit better. Everybody else says it's the worst officiating in the state, which I don't know, but
it's different.
I like that we get to play.
Yeah, well,
where you go somewhere else, they don't get to play as much.
And here,
so I think
I'll
that's
give you
different
one
for other coaches.
When like we just mentioned, Coach Hollifield. When Coach Hollifield was at Kennett and South Pemiscot, St. Hornersville, he came up to Sykeston. So that's really coming to a different area. I mean, it really was.
Yeah.
So like something like that, to where he came up and he was playing the same way, man to man, same kind of a thing, and then he got to be around some of the zone pressing coaches, like you mentioned in our podcast.
All something different, yeah.
Where it's like, I've always wanted to try this. Now that I'm close enough to be able to observe it, I really think that this might be something that, I want to try. And so, we're going to bring in a special guest here real quick on the show. This is impromptu. This is the beauty of live podcasting, Tobe. You still there? Oh, you're not there.
Hello.
Scoot, you're live on the podcast with us. Toby, sorry I cut you off there for just a second, but we had a chance to bring somebody on. This is the beauty of live podcasting. We're
Cool.
on. The number one question we get on the podcast all the time. The number one question: when is the Scoot Dog coming back on the podcast?
It floods the inbox.
And finally, the Scoot Dog has come back. And so, Scoot, I know you're driving home from work. You and I, we traded a quick phone call earlier. So, man, how's it going on a Sunday night?
I gotta be honest with you, it has not been that great of a Sunday evening for myself. But you know, it's all good. I'm on my way home. I've got 2 days off coming up, so that's like a year in Walmart years, by the way.
Right.
You know,
Wait a minute.
you don't have good 2 days off.
He said 2 days off. Man, that's cause for the horn right there. So
Hey, I've been meaning to ask you all, who's winning in the whole contest at this moment? Because I haven't been able to be able to keep up. So I just, I am under the impression
You're going to be amazed at the answer to this.
Here's the thing. To recap for the people that didn't hear the very beginning of the bracket challenge, Toby and I drafted 4 people each.
Yeah.
One person to pick each region of the bracket. So we had 4 complete strangers pick independently random from each other. And then Toby and I took their final 4 and picked who was going to win that. So like this thing is as random as it can be. And Scoot, Toby or myself have no teams left. So our score is not going to change. You understand right now? Like it's not going to change. And we are in a dead tie.
Is that right?
It finished as a dead tie. So
Now, I just have one question. Did my team make it all the way to the end like I thought?
They did not.
Michigan, right?
Michigan made it. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, Michigan, your team did.
David picked the Blues.
That's a win for me, man. That's a win for me.
No, hey, look, you did better than anybody on my team. You did.
Is that right?
You did better than anybody.
Than the Freed boys.
Yes. Now, the Freed boys went pretty hard in the paint. They did.
They were combined 22 for 30 in their picks.
Yeah,
is that right?
They were solid.
Brian Freed went 12 for 15.
Yeah, Mark.
All I gotta say is I'm impressed with that because I really wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, Mark and Brenda's boys, they did well. They did well. And so Scoot, we're talking about something else, and maybe you could chip in. And again, we're not, like TMZ. We're not breaking news, anything like breaking news. That's not what we do. Which that's a whole other inside joke that we can't tell on this podcast. But basically, Scoot, what we're talking about is this is the time of year when coaches change jobs and, what coaches should look for in a job. But we started it out talking about it's also the time of year that teachers change jobs. Now, you're a 12-year veteran teacher who switched over to do something else. This time of year when you were a teacher, what did it look like for you on the job hunt? Like, because you stayed in one place that whole time, but throughout the years, did you ever say, hey, I may look over here? Or because, like, I know you and I have talked about this away from the podcast. Like, you have a lot of friends who you taught with, like Frank Staples, for example.
Right.
Great coach at Scott County Central, went to become an administrator. Kim Blissett, who was the teacher at Scott Central, was a counselor, went to be an administrator. So you teach with these people, they go become an administrator somewhere else, and they're like, hey, Scoot, man, if you ever want to come over here, man, I got a spot for you because you were so good. So what's it like from just the teaching side? What do you listen to? The money? Do you listen to the opportunity, the teaching schedule? What would pique your interest?
Right now, like in the position I'm in, I think it's just, the program itself, like what's going on at the school, like is there any changes going on that's like worth coming over for? I was blessed. I didn't have to, look for a job, like I was at Scott Central for 12 years. It's the only place I've ever taught. For me, it was just the community, is where I was from. Like, and to be honest about everything, like I never really wanted to teach anywhere else.
Wow.
I don't know if this is an old school way of looking at things or if people still see it this way, but I'm a true believer in giving back to my community, and you know, I'm a product of Scott County Central, and you know, like, you know, the kids that are going there now, you know, are just like the kids I grew up with, and you know, unfortunately, not every people that come from, you know, and I know this is true at any school, but unfortunately, you know, some people, you know, don't come out of the situation in a good light, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good way of putting it, but I always thought being there, you know, people like yourself and myself, you meet Toby, you know, like, people have gone on and do things with their lives, you know, being that example. You know what I mean? Not saying that, again, not saying that nobody's done it at Scott Central, because they have. Scott Central is a great school, you know. But, you know, that was it for me. You know, I was blessed to be around, you know, some of my former friends' kids, you know, and, of course, meeting, you know, the new families that move in, whatever. So, I mean, like I said, I don't think that there was anything that's just going to pull me away, you know. But.
Yeah, and that's a you know what, I mean,
you listen to me closer than you've ever listened to me before.
You listen to me closer than you've ever listened to me. That's maybe the best answer in the history of our podcast. And, you know, just where you're talking about, you know, giving back to your community. And once once you're at a place for as long as you were there, you kind of become entrenched in, you know, those are your kids.
Right.
The same thing I think is true with coaches. And you worked with a couple of different coaches that came through there. You worked with well, you and I started out there working together. You worked with Kenyon Wright. You worked with Frank Staples. How about this? Frank is going to come on the podcast with me. Frank texted me.
Yeah.
Give me a good Frank Staples story, man. Like, give me a good Frank Staples story. The guy won a couple of state titles there at Scott Central. Now he's an administrator. Frank and I talk basketball all the time. Give me a good Frank Staples story.
You know what? I'm going to give you a Staples story that has nothing to do with, like, coaching, like, you know, during the season. I think my favorite Staples story is back in the day, he and I would go into the gym with these junior high boys, and, you know, the junior high boys are always talking smack and how they can beat us and whatever. Well, Frank and I, we decided that we were going to put on a lock-in, and we had this big old lock-in for the junior high kids, and we decided to have a basketball tournament. And, you know, I believe Alan Christ even come up and play one time. If Alan's listening, he'll probably remember this, because we beat them on a buzzer beater or something like that. Anywho, make a long story short, we made these fake replica tag team championship belts.
Nice.
And we, like I said, we had this big tournament during the lock-in, and we ended up smoking everybody, you know, which was going to happen anyway, because, you know, Frank's an awesome player, and, you know, I'm not bad. And, yeah, I think that was it. But I want to say this on a personal note about Frank Staples. Frank is probably he is one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. Frank will just do anything for anybody. And the one thing that I really respect about Frank is when he took over the program at Scott Central, you know, I'm going to say this from my perspective, I don't believe that he got as much help as maybe some of the other coaches that come through. And no disrespect to them, because, you know, they did their thing. But Frank came in, and he made that team his own. And I remember, I believe they kind of switched up the way Scott Central played a little bit. And I don't think a lot of people were too happy about that. And, you know, I know there's a lot of pressure, but the cool thing about State is, man, you know, people think that I have a great rapport with kids. He had a way with kids that, you know, a lot of people don't. You know, he didn't have to raise his voice at kids to get their respect. You know what I mean? And, you know, you could see that when he's out there, like, he genuinely loves the kids. You know what I mean? And that would be, you know, if I gave any advice to any teacher or any coach or anything, love your kids, you know, because they sense that stuff. They know. And, you know, once you have that respect, you have that love, man, they'll do anything for you. You know what I mean? And I'll never forget the first time State won state title. It was actually right before the finals. I just told him, I was like, man, you know, I'm super proud of you. You know, just remember, when this is all said and done, man, you did this on your own, man. You did this. And like I said, his work ethic, man, I could go all night and just talk about how great State is. Really.
Man. And so let's shift gears right into a guy that we all know and love, Kenyon Wright. You worked with Kenyon.
Oh, yeah.
Kenyon and I are super close, and he played for me. So give me a good Kenyon Wright story.
Man, I don't know how far I can go back on this one. I met Kenyon when you were coaching him in Bell City. And, the one thing that I love about Kenyon was, man, he had a passion. And I'm sure he still has that passion for basketball. But I'll never forget, and he may not remember this, but I do. And I don't know why it just sticks out to me. But I remember there was one game that you all had. And I couldn't even tell you who you were playing. But I think y'all ended up losing. And Kenyon was so distraught over that because he didn't feel like the rest of the guys cared as much as he did. It's like, hey, man, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. It was at that point there, man, just like, all I could say is the passion, man. That was the passion I saw he had for basketball. And what's funny is, like, once he had graduated from high school and all and talked about becoming a coach, I was like, man, he's going to do it because of that passion. And Kenyon's another guy that, he's a great guy overall. And it's funny because, like, with the exception of, like, your brother and, like, Dom and Kenyon's probably the only one from Bell City that I really, keep up with. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't spoken to him in a little bit, but obviously I'm in Tennessee now. But, it was fun being able to work with Kenyon after watching him grow as a basketball player, as a student and all that. And, again, can't say enough good things about Kenyon Wright. That's
right. Yeah, he's. I remember you talking about the passion. I remember we beat Puxico one night. I want to say we beat him like 94-31 or something. We beat him, pretty bad. And after the game was over, and this might be the game you're talking about, he was just so upset after the game. Like, and it wasn't, for show. It wasn't like he was genuinely upset with the way he played and with the way we played. And we had just won by like 50 or 60. And he was just genuinely upset. Like, that is not how we're supposed to be playing. And we've got to fix this. And
right.
Like you said, he just had such a passion and attention for detail. And so, but yeah, this time of year is always fascinating. And, now that I'm superintendent, I was talking with our board here about a week or so ago. We had a meeting. And I said, this time of year is stressful for teachers because you're in the middle of state testing. Now you're in April. Everybody's going to start state testing. You've got some teachers who are moving on. You've got some, now we have to replace those teachers. You've got some teachers that are looking for another job maybe, like not because they're unhappy or upset or anything like that, but just maybe they're trying to get back closer to where they're from, or maybe their spouse got a job and they're moving, things like that. But, when you've got, say, a hallway of elementary teachers, if there's 8 teachers in that hallway and 2 of them are not coming back for whatever reason, and then you've got state testing and everything else going on, and they know that new teachers are being interviewed to replace those 2. It's just a lot of balls up in the air that you're juggling right now,
Right.
And it's stressful time for a teacher. So, how did you approach this time of year? I mean, I know you and I used to talk. You'd say as a teacher, you'd kind of go off and try to keep to yourself. You just stay out of the teacher's lounge, things like that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I was fortunate to be in a place for as long as I was. Unfortunately, when you're there long enough, you see turnover, and in case of Scott Central, there was one position that was always coming open, and for me, I think it's just like anything else. I think stability is the first word that comes to my mind. Like, with that position turning over as often as it did, like, if you knew it was going to hinder, student growth in some ways, because again, let's just be real. There's a difference between a teacher choosing to leave versus not having a choice. And unfortunately, in that position, I think it was more of a not having a choice. And, they're doing just like I imagine anybody else would at that point. You do what you got to do to get through the day, and you're just counting down the days until, you're dismissed. You know what I mean?
That's a great point. That is, excuse me. Go ahead.
Being that guy that watched that, though, it was really hard because, what do you say? Because, again, you can go in there and you can try to, encourage and say, hey, let's just get through the rest of the year. But, again, being real, hey, I'm not coming back. It's almost like, what's the point? And I'm not going to say that all of those teachers stayed to teach. Some of them might have even gotten out, but, in my hallway, there was 4 of us. And, if one person was going to be leaving, that just, is really going to cause a disruption on our hallway because, again,
Exactly.
I'm you never know who's coming in to fill that spot. That was always a little scary for me. And luckily for me, the last 2 years that I was at Step Central, I got to sit in on the interviews. So at least I got to, to meet these people that were applying and kind of give my say on what I thought. And, again, kind of taking on that leadership role when they came in, they'd remember me from the interview, and I could give them pointers or whatever, and hopefully maintain some sort of balance in the hallway. But unfortunately, there were those that decided they want to do things their own way, which is fine. I mean, do what you think works. But, when things aren't working and you don't adjust, it causes more issues for the rest of us in the hallway.
And I think you make a great point where, and Toby, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about here. I won't say his name because we don't try to make breaking news or anything here. But Toby and I worked with somebody one time. He was a coach, and he did leave voluntarily. He got a bigger, better job, And on his way out the door, he had a month of school left, and he's a good friend of both of ours, but he just checked out. He was checked out because he was so excited about his new job. He was so excited, and rightfully so. He had earned that opportunity. And when he was going to this new job, though, it's kind of like there were things that, hey, we still got a month of school left. We got to get this and this done,
Right.
And so there were some things that Toby and I had to take on his way out the door to kind of help smooth that transition. And then sometimes it's like you said, I've seen this happen where it wasn't by that teacher's choice. The board voted to remove that teacher for the following year. So whether it's whoever's choice it was, I think education it's fascinating, and it's really one of the only jobs I can think of that's like this, where you can have 6 or 8 weeks of school left and know that you're not coming back to this job as a teacher or a coach. And so you're not going to, I don't care who you are, you're not going to be as motivated or as invested in that job if you know you're not coming back.
Well, I'll say this too, and I think this is something that's very important for everybody to think about. You got to remember, it's not the kid's fault. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if you check out, you're hurting the kid. I'll use myself as an example. Whenever I decided to take on, and move, I didn't check out. The one thing that, I can honestly say is that I continued to put my best foot forward, even though I knew I was going to be gone. We still had, map tests and stuff to worry about. I was teaching science, so I only had the map for science. But I remember before, the kids knew I was leaving before we ever take the test. And I just remember, hey, we're going to go out with a bang, and we're still going to go in here. We're still going to, take care of our business. And, I'll never forget that even once I was gone, I was still calling, hey, how were our results? How were our results? And whenever I got those results, I contacted those kids. And I was like, hey, thank you so much for working so hard for me. And, there were some of them that did way better than they expected. And, I think that's a testament because, again, kids didn't make that decision for me. I made that decision. And so, and even on the flip side, even if you don't make the decision to leave and somebody else does, you still have a job to do. You know what I mean? I kind of look at it this way. I mean, it's kind of like, you got a sinking boat, but do you just let it sink, or do you try your best to, keep the water out until you can get to safety? I don't know. I don't even know if that's a good analogy or not, but I do think that, for me, if I were ever in that position, I think too much of myself as far as my work ethic, and I couldn't leave on a downer like that. I just couldn't. I'd have to keep going.
Yeah, and it's just a fascinating industry where, you make these decisions about next year while you still have to finish this year, I guess what I'm saying. And it's as opposed to when I was down in Florida, ran the charter school down in Florida, they do it completely different down there. I mean, we would not tell people until the last week of school for that reason, because we didn't want anybody to check out. And I say we, that was just the way they did things. But I was very uncomfortable with that because I felt like that didn't give people a chance or a time to look for a job for the next year. Like it didn't give them time.
Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong though. Like you all in Florida could fire them like in the middle of the school year and get somebody in right away, right?
Yeah,
like there was no contract.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Well, there were contracts, but they were at will contracts. So like
I
could
got you.
fire you for any reason, or you could quit for any reason. Like whereas in Missouri, the contract is a two-way street. As far as I can't fire you in the middle of the year without having a whole lot of evidence and a hearing and all this and this and this. But vice versa,
Right.
you can't walk out the door and say, hey, I'm going to go teach at Orion or Scott City or whatever either. You can't do that.
Right.
Your contract is here, and if you try to break that, I can take your teaching license.
Right.
So like it's a two-way street, whereas in Florida, it was open door. It was a two-way street also. Like I could fire you for any reason, any point in the year, but vice versa, you could also say, hey, there's a job that pays $10,000 more. I'm leaving you in the middle of November. So
Right.
it was like the Wild West down there, with all the charter schools and everything, and they're trying to bring that to Missouri right now. And I tell people we don't want that because for all the positives and negatives with the system that we have in place here, that like it's what you just said. It's not the kids' fault. Those kids deserve that same teacher all year long. You know what I mean? God forbid it's not something terrible going on, but I mean it's just.
Right.
For better or worse, the kids deserve the same teacher all year, and so, you didn't know that you were going to actually come on and hijack the show tonight. But
I
I'm
had
gonna
no
be real
idea.
honest with you right now. This
Tell me how
moment
things
came
going
to
with you,
me
sir.
in a dream.
Oh, they're going great.
About a month
Even
ago.
better now that I get to talk to you.
I was about to say it's been a while, man. I'm sorry I haven't been keeping up. I'll publicly apologize to Toby Heath, for being a crappy friend.
But here's the thing. This is what I do not want you to apologize for, and that is destroying him in your side of the bracket. Because
You both in that part, big time.
because of you, we are tied right now. So,
Yeah.
well, guys, it's about that time for us to wrap it up tonight. Scoot, you jumped in there like a champ, and again, the number one question we get all the time is when are you going to get Scoot Dog on a podcast? And so I know our ratings. We probably just beat Monday Night Football.
They had
and
a
stuff like
spike
that.
a little bit.
It had to, and so
I had to.
it had to have. And so, who knows? Maybe events will, line up to where the three of us could be like in the same geographic area of a map one day. You know what I mean?
That could be epic.
That would be awesome. And so until then, we thank everybody for tuning in. We thank everybody for supporting the website and the podcast. If you haven't seen the new updates on the website, justwintoday.com, you can go create your own profile page, create your own news feed. So if you like the basketball stuff, hey, it's there for you. If you're not interested in this basketball stuff, you're just there for that daily motivation because you want to be a winner, that's there for you too. And so if you're just there because you like music, because that's another thing that we're passionate about on this show is music. And, Scoot, we could have a whole podcast about whether or not Leonard Skinner's overrated. And then we could have a whole podcast about the word overrated. And so, and whether it's actually a real word or not. So that's a whole other topic. But all those things are there for you on the website, justwintoday.com. And we appreciate everybody taking a minute to tune in. And so until next time, I'm going to sign us off. JWT.